Hey guys, how's everyone doing? This is Laura here. I'm going to go through a Leaving Cert history essay with you today from the 2018 paper. It's from the Division and Realignment in Europe topic and the question about the Hungarian Uprising. Now you see on the screen in front of you guys the various aspects that I'm going to go through about picking the question and planning your answer and then of course the answer itself. So I won't be going into every single paragraph on the essay. Therefore, it would be a great idea to have a read of the entire essay before we start to get into it together, because it would just make it all a bit clearer for you in your mind as I'm referring to different paragraphs. It would just help make it all clearer in your mind as I start to break it down for you. So let's get into it. Let's firstly look at the question itself. I want you guys to be confident on the day of your Leaving Cert exam that you kind of know how to pick a question, you know, what to look out for to make sure that you are ticking all of the boxes for the examiner as best you can. So in relation to this question, for example, one thing to look out for, and indeed in all questions, look out for AND. It tells you straight away that there are two parts to the question. The bit on one side of the and the bit on the other side of the and. Why was there an uprising and why did the Soviet Union try to crush it? Well, they didn't try, they did, but why did they want to crush it? Two parts. You don't have to deal with the two parts equally, but you do have to deal with both parts. The other thing to keep an eye out for, a lot of the cases are plurals, you know. It's not just one step, it's steps. Why did they keep going to try to crush it? Why was it so important to them that this Hungarian uprising didn't happen or didn't get out of hand or didn't succeed? You know, why did they try this and then this and then this, you know, in order to crush it? Also, always keep an eye out for dates, and of course the date is mentioned here. You're going to stick with that date, obviously, but you do have to give some context and some background. You need to set the scene for the reader in relation to what was going on in Hungary, in the world, in the Soviet Union at this time, as to why this was happening and why it was going to happen and what else was going on that kind of impacted it at the time. Okay, keep all those in your mind, guys, as you are picking your questions on the day. Make sure you're familiar with the paper and what the questions look like and, the types of questions that tend to come up. Before we get into the actual question, let's just look very briefly at the marking scheme and have a think about a couple of small things. The examiners, when they get your big bag of papers in June, when you've painstakingly written all your essays, they're told, make sure you look at how the candidate, that's you, how the candidate treats the set question. Put basically, are you answering the question that's asked on the day, or are you answering the question that you think was asked, or are you answering the question that you had hoped would have been asked? So are you referring back to the actual question that was on the paper in front of you? Or are you just simply summarising everything you know about the topic, in this instance the Hungarian uprising, or are you actually looking at the why, and then the why did the Soviet Union try to crush it? Then you are dealing with the set question. On top of all of that, the examiners are told to look out for the amount of detail, accurate, substantial, specific information, facts, detail, evidence that is given. Okay, that's where all the learning off comes in. Do you just know that, the leader of Hungary wasn't liked, or do you actually know his name? Do you know his full name? Do you know his nickname? Do you know who took over from him? Do you know the political party he was attached to? Do you just know the basics, or do you know accurate, substantial information? All of those things are going to impress the examiner, and they're going to throw marks at you for those kind of things. So keep those things in your mind as you are answering your own questions, as you're reading back over them, and indeed as you are studying sample answers. Now this essay is pretty good. Let's look at the introduction first of all. I would like, you see in the first sentence there, it talks about the Cold War. The Hungarian Uprising of 56 appeared to represent all that the Cold War stood for. Now imagine I didn't know what that meant. What was the Cold War? So just another sentence or two there would really help set the scene in relation to what was going on in the world, particularly between the USA and the USSR, and that would help clarify things for the reader. This person knows exactly what they're talking about. This is what was going on, and this is why there was an uprising. Just a little bit more there. But they do give good context in relation to World War II, particularly in relation to the Germans invading Russia and indeed Hungary and all of that. And that does help set the scene in relation to World War II, absolutely. But it's always a good idea in your introduction to give a bit of a kind of a list of this is what I'm going to talk about first, and this is what I'm going to talk about then, and then I'm going to talk about this. That then would help create a map or a direction for me, the examiner, and you, the writer. This is where I know this person is going to go. And then, of course, you need to make sure that you do actually talk about all the things you said you were going to talk about. But it would also be something for you to literally refer back to as you are writing your essay, and it would add a layer of cohesiveness to your essay. So just be careful with your introduction in this instance. It's very well expressed. There is good knowledge of the topic, is very, very evident there. But I'm just not really sure that they have enough about, particularly about the second half of the question in their introduction. A small bit more meat needed on the bones of that introduction. Let's look firstly at paragraphs 1 and 2 of this essay. I'm always looking out for opportunities to refer to the question, and I think that first sentence there is a missed opportunity. So for example, I might have started off that paragraph saying something like, one of the main reasons why there was a Hungarian uprising was that the Hungarian nation mourned its loss of identity, blah, blah, blah. Do you see how I'm referring using the words of the question straight away? And I just feel that was a slight missed opportunity in that instance there. Very easily rectified. Now, in saying that, this person does have good control, they've good structure, they've good layout. I always advise people, and you kind of do it naturally enough, to follow a beginning, middle and end structure when you're writing your essay, and even when you're writing each individual paragraph. You know, that's true, even back in your junior cert, if you can remember back that far. Generally, you will always talk about, the reasons why there was such an event, the main events in that time period, and then, the results and the consequences of that event or of that topic, beginning, middle and end. And this is followed here quite nicely. So for example, in this paragraph, the beginning, they mentioned they're going to talk about that the Hungarians were annoyed about their loss of identity. That's the beginning. That's the point of this paragraph. Lovely. I know what this paragraph is going to be about. And then the middle of that paragraph gives me pretty good, substantial, detailed information and examples of how the Hungarians felt that they were losing their identity or why they were losing their identity. Okay, so that's the middle. And then the end is supposed to sum all of that up and refer back to the question. Does it do that? The end of this paragraph finishes with, once a proud nation with a strong sense of identity, Hungary was now a puppet state of the USSR. So that's a good summation of the bits that I've put in the middle there in relation to loss of identity. All of that meant that Hungary was now a puppet state. So that's me summarising what I've said. Okay, that's fine. Again, it would be nice, first of all, if you might just briefly explain what a puppet state is to show that you know what that actually is. And to maybe refer back specifically to the question there if you haven't done it at the start. So you might have something like, once a proud nation with a strong sense of identity, Hungary was now a puppet state of the USSR, and so resentment was growing and an uprising was becoming more likely, or something like that. You can find your own language. So again, just a tiny bit of polish needed on that particular paragraph there. Something else to always keep in mind, guys, is that your paragraphs should be linked. Remember, your Leaving Cert history essays are not separate chunks of information. There should be a thread running through your essays, connecting them, knitting them together in as smooth a way as possible. Now, in this instance, it could be something as simple as, another reason the Hungarians were annoyed was that they were being led by the Hungarian Stalin, blah, blah, blah. Starting off that second paragraph there. Just to link it all together. Try to vary your linking phrases, but do remember to actually use them. Now, in saying that, this is a very good essay. There is very good extensive knowledge on display here. In this instance, lots of statistics and facts, accurate, substantial, relevant. Well put together. In general, this is a very good essay. A few things just need to be polished up on. I love this language at the end, fueling an uprising. They're not getting stuck in this kind of loop of, this is why there was an uprising, and this is why there was an uprising, and this is why there was an uprising. Great verb. All of these things fueled an uprising. It's nice language, nice expression, and of course it is a reference and an awareness of the question. Great language, great reference to the question. Moving down the essay slightly to paragraphs 5 and 6. Of course, it can be very obvious when somebody isn't sure of the order of things. This is a good example of an essay where the chronology is correct, it's accurate. There was a certain amount of planning and thought put into, okay, I'm going to talk about this, then I'm going to talk about this, and then I'm going to talk about this. And that's nicely done in this particular essay. This first paragraph in front of you here talks about the actual rising itself, the Hungarian Uprising. And the right amount of detail is plucked out. This is an example of, in relation to the marking scheme, if somebody went into huge detail about the actual uprising itself, they would not really be treating the set question correctly or accurately. Because the question wasn't about what happened during the uprising. The question is, why was there an uprising and why did the Russians try to stop it? Of course, we need to give a little bit of detail on what the rising actually looked like. But I don't need to give 2 pages about all of the activities and the bloodshed and the violence and, you know what I mean, anecdotes and things like that. So I need to be careful there. And this is a good example of someone who's aware of the facts that need to be plucked out for this particular essay. The Warsaw Pact is mentioned twice on the page in front of you there. And it's such an important reason behind why the Russians took steps to crush this rising that it needs a bit more elaboration. What was the Warsaw Pact exactly? Who did it involve? What did it promise? Why was it a big deal that Hungary were being removed from the Warsaw Pact? In relation to the second half of the question, that needed to be elaborated on a bit more. In the middle of this paragraph, it talks about the growing tensions on a global scale. Another slightly missed opportunity. What were the tensions that were going on that global scale? Because that is, again, all of those things are important to illustrate why the Russians wanted to stop this rising. You know, and it's just kind of plonked in there in the middle of that paragraph, and a bit more detail is needed on it, particularly for the second part of the question. Your conclusion needs to be strong. You want to sum up what you've said, analyse what you've said, and place it all in the wider context. And this conclusion is not bad at all. It's very good. It does give a good summary of the events that were mentioned. It does state them very clearly, good expression, good language, and it does place everything in the wider context of things that happened after the Hungarian Uprising of 1956. What I would love this person to do is give a bit more analysis of the events mentioned. You are encouraged to engage in historical debate. So everything that I've said over the last 3 or 4 or 5 pages, this is what I think about them all. This is my opinion. You know, I'm going to scrutinise everything I've said. And, you know, it was clear from these actions that, you know, it's obvious now that there was never a hope for, or some, you know, something like that. Find your own language, but don't be afraid to give an informed opinion. And then you are engaging in historical debate. You're not just throwing down all the bullet points that you've learned off about the Hungarian Uprising. Okay, now this is an excellent conclusion, and I'm just giving some advice about how it could be made super excellent and the things to keep in mind as you move forward and you're writing your conclusions from here on out. That brings me to the end, guys, of this essay breakdown today. I hope you found it helpful. Now don't forget, you can find the full essay analysed on Studyclix if you'd like a bit of detail about the paragraphs that I didn't specifically mention today. And I want to wish you all the best of luck, and I hope to talk to you again. Bye bye.